Cynicism is just another form of cowardice. For our sergeant are not interested in a midlife crisis. We were to do our freaking work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Spotlight Podcast, Success Stories for Veterans, where it is our job to break down and analyze Titans in both the military and civilian communities to discover their tactics, their mindset, and their systems so that you can take those and apply them to your life. These Titans range from New York Times bestselling authors to former heads of state to other divergent thinkers who dominate their field by challenging conventional wisdom. And today we are interviewing Steph Figarelle. Now, Steph has been involved in the fitness industry for well over 17 years at this point, and I know from personal experience that Steph is one of the rare breeds of trainers that actually practices what she preaches. And Steph has been successful because her clients actually get and maintain results. And in an industry where people spend a lot of time focused on their body, Steph spends a lot of time helping people fix their mindset. So how does she do it? Stick around and find out. All right. So tell me a little bit. And one of the main reasons I asked you about this is because when you were starting out in your career in the fitness industry, you were working at FedEx, you were going to school, you were doing your own bodybuilding competition, and you were starting Figarelle's Fitness.
Yes.
Tell me about that whole time in your life.
Sure. So I got into bodybuilding when I was in high school, and I decided, because I wasn't doing any extracurricular activities like playing any sport for high school, I decided to enter a competition in my senior year, which at East High, the competition was called the Mr. and Miss East bodybuilding competition. So I decided that my focus would be on learning how to properly prepare with whatever information I could get a hold of, which at the time wasn't a lot because the internet was still new in 2000. I didn't have a computer at home. Yeah, so I had to find every kind of old bodybuilding book that I could get my hands on, magazines, things. So I did my very best with that. Long story short, I ended up competing in and winning that competition, and it just totally changed my life. I realized how much control over my body I had, how much control really over my mindset I had if I specifically focused on something. And I decided that I'd figure out a way to make money, make a living, helping people do the same thing. So it took me 4 years to figure it out. And in 2004, I got certified as a personal trainer and decided to just figure it out, do whatever I could to make it at least a part-time job. Yeah. And it didn't go very well. I didn't have any business sense. The community up here was very competitive and small. So I had a hard time connecting with other trainers who were willing to help me, or I didn't really know where to go. So I worked as an independent contractor at a couple of gyms, and I didn't know anything about marketing or sales or any of that. So
do you have an example of how it didn't go well starting out?
Yeah. So I didn't know how to price my packages or my services. I really undervalued what I was doing, but because I was new, I figured, well, this is fine because I don't actually even know what I'm doing. So people shouldn't have to pay a higher rate. I'll just, I'll give them a deal, which in the end is very difficult to come out of once you do become more experienced as a trainer, because you end up really overworking yourself and not making a lot of money. So I would say undervaluing my services, not charging enough, not having structured policies and procedures. So I had a lot of frustrations with clients because things weren't very clear. So, people take advantage of you a little bit and you learn, you get mad and you fix it. I would say that I didn't have any understanding of what it meant to be, to market my services or sell. And eventually what was so funny is I ended up marketing a lot on Craigslist, like just advertising for outdoor boot camps. And to this day, I still have a client who I met through Craigslist, and I've had her, she's worked with us for 10 years. And it's so funny because you would think Craigslist is, not a great place to market your services, but we've, have this fantastic client we've had for 10 years. So, I learned as I went along. So.
Do you think that you would be where you're at now, though? I mean, obviously this is part of your journey, but do you think that you would still be doing it if you hadn't learned those hard lessons early on?
I mean, I think the adversity that we face really is what can motivate us, but it can also be the thing that completely derails somebody and makes them want to quit. I just didn't have that in me. I knew this was something I really loved and I knew that I could be good at it. And it wasn't in my mind to ever quit on the goal of starting a successful business. So it wasn't just like, oh, let me have a hobby where I train people. It was like I wanted to help people actually change their lives. And I was so passionate and I believed in that so much that there was no quitting in my mind. It wasn't even, no thoughts ever came in my mind to give up. So
Okay.
I just kept going. I just kept knocking down the obstacles and learning and then you change direction, you figure it out,
Yeah.
you keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, especially ambitious people, and I hear this a lot coming from veterans who want to either start their own business or trying to take the next step up in the corporate world. They share with me their frustrations about other people kind of giving their opinion on what they're doing, and the crab in the bucket mentality. Did you ever run into that? And if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah. So much. It started in high school when I was competing in the first bodybuilding competition. People were like, well, this isn't healthy. Are you sure? That was my first taste of people uh, kind of, I guess, giving me this negative feedback, or I was butting heads with people who weren't. I was so excited about this thing, and I thought, well, this is a good thing. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Why isn't everybody else? So that was my first experience with that, and then it got really crab in the bucket bad when I worked at FedEx. And I was just talking about this on a video that I posted on Facebook. And what had happened there were, there's a lot of young people who work at FedEx and there are a lot of older people. It's a fantastic company. And what they really excel at is making sure that people have great benefits and that they pay for school. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of it, because I needed a little bit of that financial help for school. And I decided that as I started to get more clients, I thought, this was about 2006. I thought, okay, I should step out and go full time in 2007, make that a goal. And I started to tell people about it. And because my first client came from a referral of a coworker from FedEx, and then it all just took off from there. And I was competing in 2006. So of course my coworkers would come to my shows and support me. So that was awesome. But I started to get a lot of this, well, how are you going to pay for school? What if it doesn't work out? What about benefits? You're not going to have any benefits. But it just, for me, it wasn't a good job because I felt like I needed something else in my life. It just wasn't a good fit for me. I have fantastic memories, and I met so many great people. I mean, people I still talk to this day. But for me, it just was like, it wasn't where I wanted to be. And I knew that I needed to go and do something that was meaningful and gave me purpose, and personal training was what that was. And I started to get scared when I heard people who, I remember one coworker in particular was dealing with cancer, and he was getting all of his medical paid for. And he was just like, oh, where would I be without this medical? And I started to get worried. Well, I'm not going to have medical right off the bat. I'm going to have to take that risk.
Yeah.
And that scared me because I'd always had that safety. Like I grew up, my dad was, he's retired Army. So I had his benefits until I was 26 because I was in school and I was able to keep those. So I never knew life without benefits.
Right.
And, so you take that risk. And I realized that I had to make the choice between taking the risk and going into uncertainty, or staying safe in my comfort zone, but being absolutely miserable every single day. And I chose to be happy.
There you go. Well, that's good. So when you're dealing with that risk, and it sounds like, there's always that fear that lingers in the background. What process did you use to actually fine tune your thinking?
I read a lot. Constantly, and I didn't have a lot of money. So I spent a lot of time at the library, and I would try to find books that would give me the confidence to go off on my own, because like, my parents didn't impose any expectation on me to go to college or become anything. So I never had the pressure of a direction, their chosen direction. And I find that to be a good thing for me, but it was also a lot of floundering because I just didn't know what to do and nobody was telling me what to do. So I was like, well, I really just went off the way that I felt. So if something made me happy, I would do it. And sometimes those things weren't always good. But I recognized as I got older, hey, I really want to be good at something. I want to be maybe the best that I can be and develop skills around that. So I decided to just start reading everything that I could find. Like I said, would go to the library and check out a huge stack of books. And eventually I started just ordering books from Amazon so I could build up my own library. Yeah. And that became really important to me, to just learn from other people, because you save a lot of time if you apply what you learn. And that was my deal with myself, was if I'm going to go this route and take this risk, I have to devote myself to learning and applying every single thing that makes sense for me to apply. So that's what I did.
Was there any book or resource in particular that during that early phase, as you're handling that fear and you're trying to piece your way through it, that really was more of a guiding rod than the rest of them?
There was a book, and I don't have it in this room, but it was called, I still have it. It's like falling apart. It's tattered and all marked up, but it's called Why Are You Not Your Own Boss? Something like that. Maybe I don't have it exact. But it basically it was all the arguments as to why you should work for yourself. And I would read it in the parking lot at FedEx before my shifts. And I would just like sit there and I'm trying to devour as much information as possible to pump myself up and get the confidence, to give my 2 weeks notice or something. And I just remember like just feeling so like I didn't want to go into work. And I remember reading something along the lines, I don't even remember exactly what it said, but it was basically like, the moment where I decided I can do this, it's going to be really scary. I mean, it was like so unclear what I should do, because it just wasn't a thing where my parents didn't own businesses and I didn't know anybody who did. So I really had to trust myself and that little voice that was telling me you can do this. And so that book was huge. A little bit later, so maybe around 2008-ish, I started to shift a lot of the way that I approached lifestyle design. So building my business around the way I want to live my life. And that was the 4-Hour Work Week. So Tim Ferriss, huge, oh my gosh, just devoured that book and applied everything that really made sense for me to apply. In between, everything I could get a hold of by Brian Tracy has been huge. In fact, I'm re-listening to the audiobook, The Luck Factor by Brian Tracy. And he speaks so simply and his concepts are so easy to just execute. If you can get over the things in your mind that are telling you, oh, this won't work, or oh, that's so simplistic. I love the way he delivers his message. And so anytime I can read anything by him, I think I have 5 of his books, and there are a lot of crossover similarities in each of his books. Like he says a lot of the same things, but you need to hear that, that repetitive stuff.
Yeah. Otherwise, how do you internalize it? If
exactly.
So I'm also a huge Tim Ferriss fan. And that for me was a huge turning point. It was like 2014. And that was the first time I had ever heard these concepts post-military. I recommend Tim Ferriss to everybody. I'm not familiar with Brian Tracy, but talk to me about that first day. All right. You put in your 2 weeks notice. Your last day comes, and then the new beginning starts. Tell me about that first day of being on your own.
Yeah. So it was, I approached everything so conservatively and so shoestring budget, low overhead. It literally was the seamless transition because I took it so slowly, and I think I made very calculated decisions. I didn't just snap one day and I'm in like financial ruin trying to hurry up. I don't have the story of I have, tons of debt and like a mortgage and this and that. I actually was able to figure this out in a way where once I transitioned to owning my own business, I immediately, within a period of time, my number one goal was to get out of debt. And so I did have school debt. I had my truck loan debt, of course, insurance. But I was able to figure out my financial situation to now where I could focus on building a savings to protect me if I needed, some sort of medical situation. So my mindset really going in was like, get out of debt, number one. I don't have an exact memory of the very first day because I transitioned sort of like one foot still in FedEx and then like one foot in the business. But I can tell you right now, the feeling that I remember as I'm thinking about this was just freedom. I mean, I remember just having such this like weight lifted, clear vision, excited for the future. Like possibilities are endless. I mean, it was amazing. It just was so full of, I was so full of hope and just excitement.
Yeah, I think that's something that doesn't get discussed a lot. When we talk about how risk averse people are, people will avoid the pain and not seek the joy. I mean, talk about that joy. What were the impacts in the other areas of your life, and even just not professionally?
One of the positives was my sister had a baby in 2003, and I was able to actually be there a lot for her because I had fully, she was still very young. She was about 4. And so she would hang out with me. I worked from home. So she was able to just be with me all day and she didn't have to go to childcare. And so that was pretty cool that I could be a part of her life in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise if I had to work a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. I had a lot of free time to think, but the thinking wasn't wasted. It was planning. It was always trying to grow and improve myself and see where I could test different things on clients to get them the fastest results possible. It was always the freedom now that you have to think versus like just grinding away at a 9 to 5 was me devoted to just growing myself and working on that.
Yeah, some of the best entrepreneurs that I've come across actually schedule time on their calendar to think. And is that something that you actually do, put time on the calendar for that, or is it just more as it comes?
Because I've been doing this for so long, my think time is automatically built in, and I have a lot of it. And if I'm not careful, I can waste a lot of time and procrastinate. Yeah. So I have more lately. I've done more like tracking my day and making like for productivity purposes, making checklists and really getting better about organizing my time. But I have a lot of think time in a day. So I'm very lucky, but I've worked hard to build that in and protect that. That's the thing too, is you have to protect it because there are a lot of things that if you start to say yes to everything, and if you don't have boundaries with people, then that think time gets infringed upon, and I won't let anybody mess with that. So
how do you protect it?
So I am very outspoken about boundaries with my family, with my clients, with everybody. So I think if you know me, you know that I speak my mind, and I do that because I want people to understand me, and I don't want there to be misunderstandings. I don't want things to get lost in translation. I think it's important to speak your truth and be authentic. And I don't say that to be cheesy or like cliche. I mean, really, you don't have to be rude either, but some things are going to be misconstrued. And sometimes people might think that you're being rude, but you're just being yourself and you're setting up those boundaries. And it's not my responsibility to worry about what other people are going to think or feel about that. If somebody doesn't like that, then I know that perhaps that person shouldn't be in my life. And really with that part of it too is like, again, this becomes really touchy because people get, you want to be careful about offending people. And I don't really worry so much about that. I am me and I tell the truth. And when you do those things, you attract your people to you, you attract your tribe. Yeah. And this is so true. And I know this because I've been practicing this for most of my life. What you'll do on the other end is you'll repel people who don't want anything to do with you or don't align with your mindset. And so you'll find your people. And that's why I'm not into people pleasing or telling everyone yes. And then feeling really frustrated and getting passive aggressive about things. I think it's important to just be honest, be yourself. Of course, be mindful. Don't hurt people intentionally. If something hurts somebody, I'm always like, come and talk to me. Let's work it out or let's figure it out. But sometimes people just aren't meant to be in your life, and they go away and you go away and life goes on. And so putting up boundaries is me just speaking my truth and sharing posts on Facebook, being very clear with my clients, being very direct with them, not sugarcoating things for people. Same with my family. I work with my mom and my wife, and we are all three extremely brutally honest with each other. And I'm not saying that's ever easy.
Yeah.
We are brutally honest about standards, about our values, about the way we want to run the business. And the same thing with any other family member. They all know where I stand on everything. So just making that clear, I think.
Yeah, that's good. And I want to go back just a moment if we could, because you talked about the finances of being an entrepreneur. And I've worked with many veterans and just people in the regular corporate world who feel like they're stuck in their job. And then we look at their finances and I'm like, well, yeah, you're stuck because you can't afford to not have a paycheck for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You can't do anything. How did you actually attack those finances and get out of debt?
So, I grew up with not a lot of money. In fact, there was a part of my life where we were on welfare, and it was a very brief period of time. And my mom and my dad divorced when I was about 4. So my mom eventually remarried and moved up to Alaska. And so that's where our life carried on, was up in Alaska. Since 1988, I've lived here. And life got a little bit more cushy up here. We had more money. We were never the kids who had everything. In fact, I didn't see my dividend, I think, but 1 year as a child because, it's being put away in savings or whatever, which was frustrating because a lot of my friends got their dividends, and I got to see how money was just, my friends got everything. They got all the coolest clothes, and I got enough. I never went without, but I always, found myself comparing myself and my experience to my friends who were getting whatever they wanted. And so as I got older, I realized that my mother was really great at managing finances, and she had to be because she was, at points in her life, a single mother, and she worked and went to school and managed a household and 3 kids. So she had to be diligent about her finances. And I learned from her that to delay instant gratification, to save my money, to be more conservative and purposeful with my spending, because, I still don't think I had like a complete picture or understanding of money back then. I wish I would have saved a lot more. And there were certain mistakes I made, but I knew for sure that I wanted to get out of debt. So I read a book, and I'm probably not going to get the name exactly right, but it was like going a year without spending or something like that. And it was about a family who went a full year without buying anything. Now, granted, they probably bought like toilet paper and groceries, but they didn't buy extra things. They found ways to get, free entertainment. I don't know. Going for walks, spending more time together as a family versus like just, going out to the movies or anywhere where they were frivolously spending. They learned to cut that. And as a challenge to myself, once again, when I read a book, I challenge myself to apply everything that I can that makes sense. And I applied that, and I ended up just building my savings to the point where I was like blown away that I could actually save money. But I got out of debt. And not only that, I was able to continue paying for school out of pocket, and, again, paying for medical out of pocket when I needed it. But everything became so simple in my life when I just learned to be disciplined with my money. Like the saying, discipline equals freedom. If you want financial freedom, at certain points in your life, you have to be very disciplined with your spending. I got rid of cable. I had a very basic phone plan. I didn't buy new clothes for a period. I have my truck to this day. I bought in 2002. It's a 1999 F-150, and I still drive it. I've had it for 18 years. And
basically your child at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's just, that's the way that I've chosen to live, is well beneath my means. I don't try to compete with people. I don't care about, I want a reliable vehicle, of course, but I don't care about having the next best thing of anything. So those things just don't matter to me. I'm not sure along the way where that came from, because at one point when I was a kid, it did matter to me. I really did want like the best snowboard. And that's the thing too, when I do make a purchase on something, I try to get something that will last me many, many years, and that is good quality. And that where I'm not, maybe buying the cheapest thing, but I'm replacing it every 3 months. So I have that mindset where it's like, get the best quality, but you're going to have it for a long time.
What are the areas that you allow yourself to spend big chunks of money on?
There are two. Number one is travel. I love to travel overseas. So that's first and foremost to me. It is a perspective shift. It's the opportunity to learn about a new culture, meet new people, to completely gain. So when you travel overseas, you gain this perspective on life at home that you will never, ever, ever be able to even come close to replicating by staying at home. You'll never be able to try to look at your life in a different way until you are, possibly 5,000 miles away and you're immersed in this loud, stinky, crazy chaos of a different country. And then you're like, wow, appreciating something. Anybody who's gone abroad knows that feeling. So travel is number one. No, we don't do like super hostel, like backpacker stuff anymore. Because as I've gotten older, I've had the experience of staying in the $12 hostel where it's 90 degrees outside and the AC dies and there's 40 dead mosquitoes on my bed. And so we try to go middle range. So we don't go like super luxurious where we're staying in crazy mansions, but we like to splurge on little things to just remind ourselves that we can and that it feels good to do that. But I also like to rough it a little bit. The second one would be education. So books, seminars, coaching, anything like that. I will splurge on just those two things and everything else, and food, but that's sort of a given. So yeah.
All right. So let me switch gears again. So that's great information on the finances. And I don't think that gets talked about enough in the world of entrepreneurs and fitness even. Because
it doesn't.
A lot of fitness regimes are somewhat expensive if you really want to go after it. Like you want to do a triathlon, better get ready to spend some money.
Absolutely. Yes.
So let's talk about fitness from a different perspective, because I talk to a lot of professionally ambitious veterans who are either confused about how to fit fitness into their life now, or they're fitting it in, but it's not working for them. And I see a lot of them following bad advice. Tell me from your perspective, how do you spot a bullshitter in your industry versus somebody who's legit?
Oh, so I have a handful of people I follow, and it's easy for me now to spot the bullshit because I've been doing this for 16 years. So I spend a large majority of my day researching, and sometimes that research is quick Instagram scrolling or actual article, like sitting down and reading actual articles. And I've run the gamut of everything fitness related. I feel like since I started, everything from CrossFit to boot camps to bodybuilding style training for like a competitive bodybuilder to triathlons to all kinds of stuff. So, I think when it comes to the exercise part of that, where I'm attracted to learning something from someone is they're talking about first and foremost keeping somebody safe, because in 2020, I think this industry should know enough by now how to protect a client from getting injured. And I want to know that whoever I'm learning from is making sure that they don't have the mentality of go crush yourself in the gym, just push through it. Now, I'm not saying don't feel pain appropriately, applied pain, but sometimes a new client, most times they don't know good pain from bad pain. In fact, even a seasoned lifter doesn't know sometimes what that will, like a joint pain versus some muscle soreness or lactic acid or, so I need first and foremost to know that this person is talking about safety first. There are some controversial exercises that coaches who I admire really despise. A couple off the top of my head: the barbell back squat and burpees. Those are two that come to mind. I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I factor it in. And I go, okay, well, if this person who I really respect doesn't like these two exercises, which I've applied with myself and my clients, why is that? And then I approach it curiously. I don't get dogmatic and mad. I think that's one of the things that people have to be careful of with nutrition and exercise is they treat it like politics and religion. And I don't see any reason for that because we have so much we can learn from each other. And if something works for you and you're safe and you're not like constantly trying to recover, you're feeling good, you're happy and you're enjoying the process and you have a purpose for why you're training in the way that you are. I think it's awesome. I think you should do whatever you want. But so people I avoid, anybody who's teaching, if I see, for example, on Instagram, somebody whose clients are moving through a workout and the form isn't very good. I have enough of a critical eye to identify when I feel like something is really not good for the spine or there's a potential down the line for that person. Maybe they don't have enough mobility in their hips, but they're squatting really heavy. Or, something like that. I assess the coaching based on not the coach or what I even know or hear of that coach, but how their clients are moving. Mm-hmm. And I apply this with myself. This is why I'm so on top of my people about form, complying with a prescribed lifting tempo, following a rate of perceived exertion, getting enough rest, eating appropriately. So to me, their form is a manifestation of my coaching and my knowledge, and I take it very seriously. So if they are getting themselves hurt, that means I'm not educating them properly. Or if they think that a deload week is stupid and pointless, I'm not educating them properly. If they can't build muscle, I'm not talking about nutrition enough. If they're struggling in some way, it's my responsibility. So I can, it's easy to get mad at your clients when they're not doing the right things, but the truth is it's the coach who is the leader in the educator. And so if the clients aren't doing something, that coach is not influential enough for whatever reason. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm looking at safety. I'm looking at form. I'm also looking at, of course, their credentials, their time in the industry, how long have they been around. I think next what I would look at is client results. So I'm not super swayed by, really sexy trainers who have got their shirts off or their asses hanging out all over Instagram. That's awesome because I do value, being in shape and being fit because as leaders in the industry, I think you should be able to practice what you preach. That doesn't mean that you have to be shredded or have a six pack. I'm not saying that, but show me the results your clients are getting. Really, that's where I want to see what are, I want to see testimonials or maybe before and after photos. But not only that, like 12-week transformation, I want to see how your clients are maintaining 2 years, 4 years, 6 years down the line. And are they still injury free? And I can get even further in this, but are you teaching your clients more of this holistic way of life? Are they happy? Do they have good relationships with the people in their life? Do they know what their values are? Are they setting regular goals? People don't talk a lot about that at all. They talk about like, okay, hit the chicken breasts and got to get to the gym 4 times a week. But it's like, but are you happy?
Yeah.
You don't need to necessarily train at a certain frequency if you're miserable every single week and you're not really, this isn't where you want to be. So it's hard. I try to learn from everybody, every coach, but there's a couple red flags I look for, and if I can't see client testimonials or progress, then I probably won't really pay attention really. So
that's That's all a great point. And you started hitting on the happiness in the friends and the relationships and in fitting fitness into life as a part of a holistic approach. And you had put something on Facebook, I believe it was the other day, talking about leaving your ego at the door. So on an individual level, and this happens with people who are very ambitious. And I see it a lot in the veteran community. People, you have this ego because you have this perception of yourself. How do you check yourself when you identify your ego? Or what controls do you put in place?
Yeah, that's a really great question because growing up and coming into bodybuilding was because I was so good about applying everything that I was reading. I never excelled in school. I had to work really hard for the B. I wasn't a straight A student. I've been, went through, like, I was suspended. I definitely had a colorful past as a kid. So I never had this like super ambitious nature about me. I was actually the opposite. I would stubbornly walk the mile while all my friends were trying to run and beat their previous time in school. I'd walk it and I'm like, I don't care. 15 minutes, that's all I need to walk for. Cool, I'll do that. I had no ambition to do anything or excel at anything. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't care about getting good grades necessarily, up to a point. And then, in some parts of high school that changed a little bit. But so when I realized I could learn and apply and get results, and they came very quickly, because something switched in my mind and I was like, you've never been you've never been great at anything. You should work hard at this and see if you can be. And, I did. And I had the hugest ego ever. I was so cocky. I was so, I was so full of myself. I mean, so full of myself. I wish that I could go back and just like knock my younger self upside the head.
Do you have an example of when you were being like particularly awful?
Yeah. Let me see. I think so it was just, of course, in my behavior. I mean, I was always really, I think I was always, I want to say I was always nice to people, but I know that's not true.
Yeah.
I went through a period, especially when I was right out of high school, where I was just, I didn't treat people very well. I definitely had a big ego. And, where that got crushed, where that turned around was I competed a year later in a state bodybuilding show in Anchorage. And this was coming right out of high school. I just won that high school show. I thought I was the shit. And I am backstage. I have no muscle compared to these other women. They're in their 30s and 40s, which is like the peak for bodybuilding. You have this like hard muscle and like these women were ripped. And I'm looking around and I'm just like, I don't think I belong here. And all that time I thought I was like, I was amazing. And I didn't train nearly as much leading into it as I should have. I had some bad behaviors that I was, I thought would be okay. My diet wasn't good, like just nothing in my life. I didn't have a positive relationship with the person I was with. And it just was really a negative time, but I had walked in real confident. And I remember thinking after the prejudging that I was very emotional because I knew that I wasn't going to win that show. And I'd walked in to win the overall and I knew it wasn't going to happen. And I kind of like, I won my division, but that was only because I was the only one in that division. And so I didn't win it by any, I didn't do anything to win it. I just showed up. So I kind of hung it up there for a bit. That was 2001. And I didn't compete again for 5 years. And what I realized was I was very humbled. I realized, that I had to be very honest about how hard I was working. I had to take better care of myself. And I changed a lot of those behaviors. I mean, I really did. And that's when I started working for myself and I wasn't feeling so stressed out working in a job that I didn't like anymore. Yeah. So I could really, meet those standards of training well for this next show, which was in 2006. And again, when you win stuff, you get real confident and your ego gets inflated. But I remembered that defeated feeling from 2001 where I was nobody. The judges didn't even look at me.
Yeah.
And I hated the way that felt, from going from being the best to being I was almost invisible, to being, to processing that for 5 years and coming back feeling like, well, I really did analyze whether or not I was doing well enough. So that was humbling, and that knocked me down a bit. As I continue on, I do find myself reflecting to stay humble, because things can come crashing down, and I keep myself in check by having good people around me. I've learned a lot about loyalty over the last probably 2 years. And just making sure that I do have good people around me. And, it's not, you're not always sure who's around you, or, why people are around you. Why are they there? And sometimes it's only because you provide a service or you do something that they want or need. And then when you no longer do that for them, there's no need for you to be in their life. And, that's been kind of humbling. So a lot of like learning from bodybuilding, different things. I just, you get humbled every day, and I just have to be receptive to learning from those things and remember what it feels like that this could all end tomorrow,
Yeah. And that's a good segue into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, determining what people to have in your life, because it's a constant gardening type of thing. And I know some people struggle with, when should I be the one apologizing versus when should I be cutting this person out because they're not working on my life at all? They're an energy suck. Versus when should I be finding new people? How do you kind of walk that line?
So again, I make sure that people know who I am, and I speak my truth, and I stay authentic. I share beliefs. Again, I love learning from people. So if somebody has a different political or religious viewpoint, of course, I think you have to be really careful with those things. You have to tread lightly and make sure you're entering those conversations with somebody willing to be humble with you and navigate through the complexities of those topics with you, like holding your hand and being okay with some of the things that you're going to say. And then you have to be okay with what they're going to say. I think we can all coexist, whether or not we agree 100% with any belief or, anything like that. In fact, I love the diversity of people with opposing viewpoints. As long as it's respectful and intelligent conversation, I love it. So I like being able to have people in my life who are willing to go there with me, even if we don't agree. I really appreciate that, because it tells me that we have a human connection. We're not just like, oh, you believe what I believe, and we're like-minded in that we both like to work out and we're both, believers of X, Y, Z. So that's why we're friends. It's like, well, no, we're friends because we just have a great human connection, even if our political beliefs are maybe the opposite from one another. Because I think we can always find similarities with others and connect pretty much on anything. That's what I found when I talk to people. This is still something I'm learning, and this has been, I think as you get older, you start to realize how to better handle your relationships, but it's something that comes with experience and continuing to work on your emotional intelligence. I definitely have softened more as I've gotten older and been one to recognize, hey, am I being the one who's actually toxic? I am first to apologize when I feel like it's a relationship that is worth preserving, because again, it takes some time to get to that point.
Yeah.
There are different things that people in your life will do, say, and how they're acting, and vice versa. And so you need to, that's kind of an individual thing for each person, like how you'll assess whether or not to part ways.
Yeah.
I like to be around people who are ambitious and excited about things. That doesn't mean I don't hang out exclusively with, those people, because I understand not everybody is like that. And I still appreciate everyone in my life. But I'm careful too, as I've wanted to change some of the things about my business. I'm careful to select people who are going to be, believers in what I'm doing, but also they're doing their thing too. And I can support them. They can support me. We have this, this relationship where we're helping each other, possibly contributing something to each other's lives, even if it's just a conversation or, just different, some kind of contribution, whatever that may be. Hey, I like your Facebook post. Cool. This arrangement here where you and I are talking today. I mean, this is awesome. So, I definitely was of the mindset at one point in my life, again, another ego thing, where I would cut people out immediately if they didn't fall in line with my expectations and they weren't reciprocating communication very well. Because I consider myself a fairly good communicator. I'm not perfect, but I consider myself somebody who recognizes confrontation can be very positive and understanding can come from that confrontation. I love people. I don't want to hurt people, but I learned that some people don't like confrontation and they don't want to have conversations with you. So their response is maybe all that they know based on their conditioning. They run away. And for me, I was going through a period of time where I found that to be very cowardly, and courage is one of my values. And I felt like it validated, like, yeah, that person shouldn't be in my life. Look, they're a fucking coward.
Yeah.
And I don't want them in my life because they can't even talk to me. They just sort of run away. Well, as I've gotten older, I realize, people are dealing with a lot of things. They're dealing with things that happen in their childhood. Maybe they didn't learn to communicate. In addition to that, work, relationships, kids, all kinds of things are happening in people's lives. And so I've learned a lot of patience and humility just in my interactions with human beings. I still have traits that really turn me off. Disloyalty really bothers me. I have a hard time with that. I think I grew up watching too many like Godfather, Scarface type movies. But I really value loyalty and honesty, because I think in order to be a loyal person, you have to be an honest person. And I know in my past, I have not been loyal. And I think why I dislike that so much in other people is because I hated it so much in myself when I wasn't being loyal. And I really value that. I really value that ability to talk it out when you're having a problem with somebody, because it shows that you value the relationship, and that even if you you part ways, you're willing to at least have closure and understand each other. And I would pretty much guarantee if you're willing to sit down and talk to somebody and have a hard conversation, that relationship isn't going to end. You're going to be like, okay, we got this sorted. Let's keep going. And even if there are like the weird feelings, like you're willing to be like, hey, I know this is awkward right now, but let's work it out. Let's talk about it. Let's keep working at it. And I've definitely had awkward things happen with people where I've responded really aggressively, and like unfriending people on Facebook who I wasn't connecting with. They weren't talking to me, and having them confront me. And right off the bat, I always say, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so sorry if I hurt you. I didn't mean to. From my end, I didn't see us connecting. You weren't talking to me. I wasn't talking to you. To me, I want my relationships to be connections where I provide value. And I don't want anything from anybody, but it would be nice to like have some sort of connection with people, even on social media. I like social media for that reason. So I've gotten way better about that over time, for sure.
Have there been any surprising beliefs that you have developed or come around to through those confrontations where somebody just kind of schooled you and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that?
Yeah. I mean, I always try to really scrutinize my behavior ahead of time. So I don't, as impulsive as I may look like I am, sometimes I'm calculating every decision that I make really, really well. And I'm a believer in the gut instinct. And I've had moments also where I've doubted it and then of course regretted that because I'm like, oh, you should have just listened to your gut,
Yeah.
because your gut more often than not, if you have developed self-trust, your gut won't lead you astray. You will always do the right thing if you listen, for the most part. Um, I think what I've learned first and foremost is to just take my own advice and communicate to people when I'm bothered by something. So rather than respond so aggressively and cut somebody out abruptly, without giving them the opportunity to talk to me and for me to share my feelings, I've recognized that it is important to just somehow connect with them and say, hey, I feel like maybe did I do something to upset you? We haven't been at the same level of connection we once were. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Instead of just shutting them out and saying like, well, forget them. They're not on my page or my level, on to bigger and better things,
Yeah. You had a post the other day too that kind of hit on that when you told people to shut the fuck up, but you were telling them, that's how you approach it now, is shutting up.
Yeah. That post, it was, I love like the dance of conversation, and I'm always trying to learn from my own approach, I guess, and I love learning about people. I mean, even like the connections and the stories you can hear. My example on that Facebook post was interacting with people on airplanes and when traveling. And so I'll share with you a quick story about my mindset around this. Okay, so I am actually a really nervous flyer, and I love to fly, I love to travel, but I don't ever just like. It's rare that I relax into my seat, and unless I'm first class and I'm like,
well, then you're drunk, yeah.
Well, and so I don't know what it is. Like, it's just anyway. When I was 19, I was flying to Montana to visit my dad, and my flight, this is the first time I'd ever flown by myself. And I'm like a hot shot at 19. I'm coming right off that bodybuilding competition. And I'm just like, I am like hot. I think I'm hot shit. And my flight got canceled because of weather. So connecting, I was able to fly from Anchorage to Seattle, but I couldn't connect from Seattle into Great Falls, Montana, where I was headed. And so the flight was canceled, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I didn't know what to do. And because my parents would have always taken care of it for me. And at the same time, I noticed that there was this lady, I think she was Korean, and she couldn't speak any English. She was probably about 65 years old, a little bit older lady. And none of the people, the airline people, wanted to help her. They were all very like busy and all this. And I remember feeling so nervous about this whole situation. Anyway, we got shuttled over to a hotel to spend the night. And I was like kind of pumped about having my own hotel room. I was like, all right, this is awesome. But over, the corner of my eye, I see this woman really scared, and she can't speak any English. And there was a part of me that wanted to help her. And I was just like, man, what would I want somebody to do for my grandmother? And I walked over to the hotel lady, and I said, at the front desk, and I said, hey, I'll help her find her room, and I'll help her get onto the shuttle and then carry on, tomorrow onto our flights. And the lady, the Korean lady, couldn't speak any English. I come to find out she really couldn't. And so the hotel front desk lady was like, okay, cool, thank you. And so I walked the lady to her room, and then I show her my room down the hall. And I'm like, if you need anything, let me know. And of course, she couldn't understand me. So the next day, we get onto the shuttle, we get to the airport, and I'm still trying to communicate with her and help her. And I'm trying to carry her bag, and she's like, no. And I'm just like, I'm just over here because I'm still so nervous about being by myself and being this like, I'm like, I need this lady. Like and we couldn't even talk, we couldn't even conversate. And I just made sure, she wasn't afraid of me or like I'm going to rob her, because I'm like trying to hold her bag for her. And she's like, no. So we ended up getting on our flight and flying into Montana. And as everybody's coming off the plane, she meets her daughter and her son-in-law, and I waved to say goodbye to her. I was like, bye, and smiled at her and everything. And she starts speaking Korean really aggressively and pointing at me and telling her son-in-law something about me. And I was like, oh no, like, I hope I didn't do anything wrong. And the guy comes over and he shakes my hand and he's like, thank you so much. We really appreciate you helping her out. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. It's my pleasure. I really felt like I was helping her, taking care of her, and making sure at least she didn't feel lost in all the segments of this trip she had to get through. And for me, it was like, we couldn't have a conversation. We didn't understand each other. But there was this human connection where I was able to reach out and help her in some way. And she understood that and she was grateful for that. And on my recent trip to Miami, which sort of triggered this post, was I was by myself, and which, whatever, that's nice to sometimes have that alone time. And for me, it's like, I love learning about people and having that human connection. So, all of my seatmates were open to talking with me. And I realized this is a really good opportunity for me to practice conversation, because when you're traveling with your significant other or a friend or something, you're less likely to talk to anybody else, because when you're by yourself, people are more apt to approach you, and you're more apt to ask for help or offer help. Like, I found myself looking for ways to help people. Like, a lady was like in a wheelchair and she needed help. And I was like, do you want me to go help? Like, I just found myself being a different version of a helper, somebody who was willing to look out for everybody else. And I think part of that stems from being a nervous traveler, where I'm like looking for ways to take the attention off of myself.
Yeah.
See where I can maybe lend a hand, but learn about other people and practice listening, because I do a lot of talking in my work, and I do a lot of listening too, because I have to in order to be an effective coach. But I find with people that they really don't do an awesome job just listening and hearing people. And that's such an important part of human connection, but also learning and just growing. And you never know who you're going to meet. That's the other thing too. It's like, you never know what cool conversation you're going to have and what connection you're going to make. So
yeah, I've had a lot of interesting conversations just asking questions, and the things that people will tell you is pretty impressive. I mean, because I highly value time and information, and people will give you both if you're a good conversationalist. It's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question before we go. I know you got to get on about your day. If I'm somebody that's trying to start my fitness journey, whether it's to restart it or to get serious about it, or maybe it's that, taking themselves to the next level so they can be an example to other people, what would you recommend that they do today, tomorrow, and the day after to get started? Just one simple thing each day.
I think as far as actions go, the first thing would be to get enough sleep. And that is like the most boring, unsexy piece of advice, but it's the piece that is missing for about, I would say, 90% of people. And instead of doing more exercise, I would say get your sleep in order and let yourself have more opportunity to go into a parasympathetic state, whether it's meditation, taking a hot bath, getting a massage, something where you're disconnected from your phone, and your boundaries are fully protected, and you're giving yourself that time, to rest and digest and recover, because it's easy to go to the gym and go to a class, attending classes, that's the boot camps and the CrossFits, and you're going hard. Well, then you go to work and you're stressed for 8 hours, and then you come home and you and your spouse are fighting, and then the kids are screaming, and you don't get to bed until midnight, and you wake up at 4 or 5. Well, then you start all over again. And that isn't the approach I recommend at all. I recommend actually building in more of this sort of parasympathetic time where you're getting more downtime and you're relaxing. Beyond that, take a very close look at your nutrition and really dial in understanding however you want to approach your nutrition, but understand whatever that may be will have to be sustainable for the rest of your life. So the fad diets and things like that, while I think can be a good temporary fix for some people, they need to be sustainable for the long run, because yo-yo dieting, it's a real thing. And I see people doing it all the time, but they cannot maintain their body weight. Who wants to yo-yo diet for the rest of their life? So take care of yourself, dial in the proper nutrition, whether that's something, where you're just focused on eating whole foods. Maybe you're tracking your nutrition in MyFitnessPal, incorporating intermittent fasting, which I love. But I think people need to understand it before they just jump in to think it's the magic strategy, because it's not. But it has a lot of value. But continue to educate yourself, continue to be a lifelong student, learn as much as you can, but even better, apply it and approach it as an experiment, and do not get tied to something and develop any sort of dogmatic belief, because you're going to change your mind and you're going to learn. And if you're not open to that and you can't be flexible, you're going to have a really hard time figuring things out down the line. When you plateau or you get stuck, you've got to be flexible, because otherwise you'll be very frustrated, I think. So.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph.
You are welcome. Thank you. It was great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. And I just wanted to take a second to ask you who you think should be interviewed on the show. Who do you think is out there that's just absolutely crushing it that the veteran population needs to hear from? That's what we want to hear from you. Send us your suggestions to spotlight@thezenveteran.com. That's SPOTLIGHT @thezenveteran.com. Thanks again for listening.